Welcome to Derek, which is the Hebrew word for the way. And this is our weekly Psalmcast, meditating on the way. Our psalm today is number 15, and my name is John Mark Hicks.
And welcome. My name is Bobby Valentine. Just glad that you could join us today as we meditate on the book of Psalms. We call it direct, walking on the way, learning a path to live before the Lord, enjoying his communion and fellowship and grace and fellowship with one another. And our psalm today is particularly poignant on that point. So,
Yeah, because
welcome.
meditating on the way, what we have in Psalm 15 is an instruction psalm.
Yep.
It's not a prayer to God. It's rather kind of a priestly instruction or
Yep.
an entrance psalm. Who
Yep.
can enter the temple? Who can come in
Yep.
here to worship God and to praise Him with the community? So, who's allowed to come into the presence of God? What is it that should characterize people who
Yep.
are seeking God and wanting to come on to God's holy hill and worship and be with the people of God? So it's
Exactly.
not a prayer, it's an instruction. And we know that
Yes.
from singing. I mean, we have songs that are praise to God, we sing to God, but we also have songs we kind of sing to each other and to encourage one another. And that's what this
Yeah.
psalm is.
Exactly. It's the kind of psalm that, well, Paul in Ephesians chapter 5 is thinking about the whole book of Psalms, but he says in verse 17 there about discerning the will of the Lord.
Hmm.
And then he tells them to sing songs, hymns, and spiritual songs. And this is what you get here. This is what this direct question placed to Yahweh. What are the kind of people who can dwell in the temple, which is kind of what Paul is talking about in Ephesians 2, uses all kinds of temple language there. What kind of people are going to seek God, who are going to be welcomed by God, have fellowship with God, who dwell in the Lord's presence? And this is good stuff. This is
So
very straight to the point.
So place this psalm for us, Bobby. Psalm 15. I mean, what are the connections here? What are we hearing here that anticipates something that's coming, or how's it connected to, Psalm 14 says nobody seeks the Lord. No one does
Yeah,
anything that's good. But then here in Psalm 15, you better be doing good or else you can't come on the holy hill.
exactly,
So there's an
exactly.
expectation that the people of God are going to do good, even though Psalm 14 says nobody does good. How do you
Right.
connect that?
Yeah, well, book one, as we recalled it, the book of Psalms is divided into five smaller books, and they take us on a journey, those books do. Book one dominated by laments, and we just had one in Psalm 14. There's no one who does any good, no one seeking the Lord, and the world is kind of a bad place, and the people end by pleading with God, Yahweh, the God of Israel, to send forth salvation from Zion. May it come forth from Zion. And what you have in Psalm 15 is kind of like um, a sanctuary that's just placed down in that book one in the midst of the storm, surrounded by enemies. And there's a safe place that you can go, that we are seeking the Lord. Psalm 15 responds to the end of Psalm 14 that there are those who are seeking God's salvation, God's presence. And when we come to that safe place, kind of like anticipating the Psalms of Ascent much later in book five of the Psalter, where you go up on Psalm 133 and 134, where shalom is just there in the presence of the Lord. This is where who can ascend that step? Who can come into the temple? Who are those who are genuinely seeking the Lord? And what Psalm 15 does is it describes the exact opposite of the kind of people that you find in Psalm 14. Here you have people who ultimately mirror the integrity and value of Yahweh, specifically in interpersonal relationships. And this is where we are. We
Yeah.
we can come. and we value. I to put it another way, I think Psalm 15 kind of describes uh, the Torah itself. The fact, the Midrash on the Psalms, the old ancient Jewish commentary on the Psalms, says that Psalm 15 is the summary of the Torah right here,
Hmm. Yeah.
which is, as Jesus would say, love your neighbor as yourself. That's what you have here. And I think that these are the kind of people that is responding in this, again, in that literary sanctuary and in historically when the pilgrims are coming to the temple. What kind of people? What kind of people? And they have to do a lot of introspection because none of this can be verified by the priest or the guard. You can't, the guard can't look at you and answer these questions. Only you can answer the questions
Right.
as you enter into the holy place.
Yeah, I think it's
Um,
really, really important to think about what those, and some people number these as 10, some number them as 11. It's actually
right.
kind of 11 sentences with
Yeah.
a main verb. So I
Yeah.
think of them as 11, and maybe even the first one is kind of like a title or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to get the structure here. There are a lot of different takes on the structure. But what we notice is, as you said, one way to summarize all these 11 sentences that have a main verb is love your neighbor. That's
Love your
what this is
neighbor.
all about, loving your neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is, Leviticus 19, love your neighbor.
1918. Yeah.
Jesus says that's the second commandment. And as you recognize, there are no ritual requirements in here. There's no, okay, do this cultic thing, do this ritual thing. These are all moral characterizations.
That's right.
Do you love your neighbor? And I think of
That's
that
right.
kind of in a similar way as Matthew 25. Matthew 25, the sheep and the goats before the judgment seat. Those are not questions about who's gonna live with God forever, who's gonna live among the righteous forever. Well,
Right.
the response of that is moral. It's who's loved their neighbor, who has visited
Right.
the sick, who has cared for the poor, who has given clothes to the naked, who has visited the prisoners. That's the sort of thing we're talking about here. That fundamentally, as we go up the hill, as it were, to worship God and to be in the presence of God and assemble with the people of God, what God's looking at is, have you loved your neighbor?
Exactly.
That's the
Yeah.
main requirement. Have you loved your?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want to drive that point home just one more step because sometimes we modern uh, believers in North America have some strange views. But this text, not only does it not have cultic or ritual requirements or economic requirements, it has no ethnic requirement.
Yeah.
It says who may dwell. It doesn't respond by saying Israelites or Jews or, and this anticipates later on in the book of Psalms where the whole world is invited to come into the very presence of the Lord. Anybody can come into the temple here in Psalm 15 if they have these basic fundamental requirements, which is mirroring the basic values of God. You know, Paul again is going to say, is God the God of the Jews only, or is he God of the Gentiles too? He's the God of everybody,
Hmm.
and he is the God of Israel, but he's the creator God, and he's inviting these nations, whoever they are, to come into his presence. And this again functions, I think, in the priestly context of Israel's own mission. Israel is supposed to be a light to the nations, and they bear that witness when the nations look at Israel and say, "What a wise people they are!" Like Deuteronomy 4. What a good God they have! So a God so near to them when they pray. Moses says, well, they want to come.
Yeah.
They want to come and worship. And it says, okay, you're welcome. There's
Uh,
nothing, no, you're welcome to
that
come.
that fits
Absolutely.
well with Solomon's prayer that,
It
at the
does.
temple, that when a foreigner or someone outside of the ethnicity of Israel wants to come and pray to God here at the temple, God will hear their prayers. So
Absolutely.
God has always been the God of all people, not just of Israel. So
Right.
let's read the psalm, Psalm 15. Bobby is our lector, and we begin with Psalm 15.
Psalm 15, a psalm of David. O Lord, who may abide in your tent, and who may dwell in your holy hill? Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue and do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest, and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Well, you and I both agree we don't particularly like the way the New RSV translates verse 1 there
Right.
with, O Lord, who may abide in your tent.
Yeah.
And so, Bobby, tell us about that word that the New RSV translates abide, and why is that significant as kind of the opening salvo of this psalm?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
can do what in the tent of God? Who can
Yeah.
abide? What is that? What is that talking about?
It's a strange word to be used right here. Actually, the word I would translate it as stay or something along those lines, but it comes from a word that means resident alien. That's what it means. In other contexts, like the Israelites themselves were aliens in Egypt, but an alien depends upon the grace and care of the culture around them for them to survive. And so the person who's coming into the tent, into the temple of the Lord, as we're going to see in the second line, they are welcome. They can dwell there. They got a real relationship with God, but we also we stay there as a guest. We stay there at the grace of the host. And Yahweh's the host. Yahweh is the host. This is his home. This is where his name dwells. And so who can come into his tent? Imagine again thinking of Abraham, and then a guest comes walking down the path, and before that guest, we find in the story actually is the angel of the Lord or Yahweh himself comes into the, nobody just goes barging into a Bedouin's tent out there in the middle of nowhere. Who can come inside Yahweh's tent and stay with him? Who can dwell there? And I think this word implies, well, I think it does more than that. It shows a the unique relationship that those who are with God have. We are there by grace. We are there by invitation. That there's still some kind of um, just not anybody can come,
Yeah.
and
No, so there are some
so
expectations, right? I mean,
absolutely,
we
yeah,
dwell by grace. We're resident aliens. This is not our natural home, you might say. This is not,
actually,
this is where we have journeyed into, and we're a stranger
yeah,
here. We're a
that's right,
foreigner here,
that's
in
right,
that kind of language. But
and it
we are
is. It
also
says
invited to dwell. That
exactly.
we can stay and we can live there, but we live by grace. We live as
That's
resident
right.
aliens.
And when a person comes inside the tent as the guest of the host, they have safety, they have security, they have
Mm,
provision. They are taken care of
right.
literally by the host. And there's all kinds of stories in the Hebrew Bible where a host is willing to sacrifice life and limb to protect the guest that comes into their home. And I think that's one of the things the psalm is saying here, again, following Psalm 14, that where can I find this kind of refuge? Pointing back to Psalm 2, that an alien can find, and it is in the temple of the Lord. It's in the presence of the Lord.
Yeah.
And you have everything you ever dreamed of or imagined, even as a resident alien. And you're there by the hesed of the Lord. You're there by the grace of God.
So if
And we,
you think about a Bedouin opening his tent to allow
absolutely.
a stranger to come in and to know the safety and have the
Yeah.
provision and
Yeah.
so on. But that Bedouin says, "Well, who are you?
That's right.
Who are you? What kind of person are you? I'm not just going to
Yeah.
let some a rapist into my tent. I'm not going to
Right.
let a murderer into my tent.
Right.
So who are you that I'm going to let you in? What kind of person does Yahweh expect to come into his tent? And that's why we get this list.
That's right.
These 11 sentences, walk blamelessly, do what is right, speak the truth, no slander, no evil, no reproach, despise the wicked, honor those who fear the Lord, stand by their oath, lend money, no, do not lend money at interest, and do not take bribes. Those 11 lines
Right.
are all characterizations of a person's character, of who
Exactly.
they are, what their integrity is,
Yeah.
and the question is, do you love? You want to come into my
Yeah.
tent? Do you love your neighbor? I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of the
They
bottom
yeah,
line.
they do. They paint a picture of a certain kind of person.
Right.
And a person, and it never uses this language here other than the fact that it addresses Yahweh, the covenant God of Israel. It never describes a covenantal relationship, which could go back to like an Israelite alone is allowed to come in here. This is anybody, as Paul's going to say in the book of Romans, there are those who do the requirements of the law, even though they're not Jews, And so you got people who live as if they do know who God is, if they are seeking Him, and the Psalm says, "Yeah, those are the kind of people that Yahweh is looking for." In other places, His eyes are seeking those who seek Him to welcome them into this wonderful
Yeah.
fellowship of Yahweh.
Well, let's pay
And
attention to some of those lines that, like the first one. I mean, the first verbal line is almost like a headline to me. I mean, I
it
don't know that
is,
you can
yeah,
make that case as a structural element, but it's the
yeah,
first one, and it's kind of just as the summary one. It seems to me.
yeah,
Uh, those who walk blamelessly. Now, blamelessly kind of knocks us off our heels a little bit here because who's blameless? Come on now,
yeah.
we're not blameless. But the word is not about sinlessness. The
Of
word is
course,
about
yeah,
integrity. Who walks with integrity? Who walks with their heart and gut and head in line with each other?
hmm
That what we do is who we are, and that what we are shapes who what we do. Do we
yeah.
have the integrity of life? God's looking for integrity when He opens the tent to let us enter.
Yeah, to say it just slightly different, they are walking on the direct. They are
Yeah,
walking on the way.
right.
And which, by the way, that line there, those who walk blamelessly, is almost identical to Psalm 119, verse 1, which says, "Happy or blessed are those whose way is blameless."
Okay.
And
The way is blameless.
we learn that being blameless, as you said, is not a claim to sinlessness by any stretch. As you read through Psalm 119, which I think is one of the great commentaries on the word blameless, the person says the very last line in Psalm 119 is, "I have gone astray, come rescue me." So you got this person who loves the Lord and loves the Torah and says, I'm faithful. I think that's the idea here.
Hmm.
They have an orientation towards the Lord, but I still need to be saved. I need the Lord to be my shepherd, like Psalm 23 that's going to be coming up right before another text like this in Psalm 24, where the Lord is my shepherd, he's going to come and get me. He's going to protect me. He's going to fight for me. And that's the kind of thing that's going on here. Blameless has nothing to do with sinlessness. There's no claim of that anywhere in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and the next line is kind of sort of the back end of that or the reverse of that.
Exactly.
It's and do what is right.
And do
So
what's right.
we have integrity and we seek to do what is right. We're
That's right.
walking, as you say, we're walking the way. And
Yeah,
that means that we're honest with our words. We speak the
that's right.
truth from our heart. So there's that kind of integrity thing again. So
Yeah,
that first verse in English, 15:2, those three lines kind of hang together to give us this
yeah,
sense of
yeah,
this is
yeah.
a person that you can trust. This is an honest person who is seeking to do what is right. He has integrity. She speaks from her heart truthfully. She is connected. She knows who she is. Right? So she's a person who's together, you might
Right.
say.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
they know who
Well,
they are. Yeah.
yeah, the word right, that's where we get the word justice from.
Right.
It's like, so
It's one of the
again,
words for justice, right?
yeah.
But
So it's
righteousness
like,
is usually how
okay,
it's translated. Yeah.
it's like, okay, here we go. We're not asking or claiming again to be some kind of um, sinless angel, but you have a disposition that I think is describing that disposition of what's going to come out of my heart, how you treat people and all that kind of jazz.
Hmm.
I treat people right. I I honor them and I take care of them. I don't take advantage of them, I think is what it's really getting at. So
Yeah.
it's a good word and it's
Hmm.
one that we need to listen to.
Well,
And
the right might be also kind of straight and the right path kind of things. It goes
mhm,
back to
yep,
the way. Yeah. Well, and when you look at verse three, then if you take verse two as kind of a header,
yep,
verse three then talks about the tongue, what we do with our mouth,
yep.
which is so important in the Proverbs. It's so important in wisdom literature. It's important in James, right? What we do with our
James.
tongue, right? And so
It's a
three
fire from hell,
things.
James
Yeah.
says.
But it begins with the don't slander and it ends up with don't take up a reproach.
Yep,
Which is more than tongue, really, but it is about okay, what are we going to do to other people? How are we going to treat
exactly.
other people? We're going to slander them. We're
Yep,
going to do evil to them. We're going to take up a grudge against them, and speak against them. So, what we do with our tongue and our actions regarding other people, this gets to that love your neighbor sort of thing.
I think so. And I think what it is reflecting here is like in the 10 words or 10 commandments, not bearing false witness. You're going to be a person of truth, a person of integrity in these relationships with other people. I will not slander. I'm not going to talk bad about this person over here. The Lord rebuke you, them that kind of thing. It's it's a powerful thing, not to slander, and whatever is coming off your tongue, though, as the end of verse 2 says, is actually what's inside your heart.
Yeah,
you know,
it's coming from the
Jesus
heart.
is
Yeah.
really into that. What we speak actually reveals what's inside. And so you have this coherence here. No play acting is going on in Psalm 15. You have a coherence of the inner and outer person. There's no dichotomy here, no Platonic dualism, but you have a
Hmm.
wholeness of the inside of this person's value system finds natural expression in what they do through their body. Their body is exhibiting the values that they have, and and especially in speech.
Yeah.
Speech is very powerful
Yeah,
in
I
the
think that
Bible.
last
So,
line in verse three does actually get to that. This is about insulting other people. It's
yeah,
about offending
yeah,
other people. It's about using your words to slice them up. You might
yeah,
say.
yeah,
Um, so how we use our tongue with regard to our neighbor, right? I mean, that's we don't want to insult our neighbor. We're not out to cut up our neighbor and to leave them
exactly.
for dead. That sort of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
But then we get the contrast in verse 4 between the who is honored and who is despised.
yeah.
Why? How do you hear that language? You those who are despised and those who are honored, and what's the difference?
I find it interesting. Again, the New RSV translates this as wicked. That particular word, there's can occur in several different places as a different form, but this particular word only occurs one other place in the Hebrew Bible, Jeremiah chapter 6, where it's talking about silver that has been tested and rejected.
Yeah,
And
rejected. Right. Hmm.
it's uh, contemptible. Well, the I think what the psalm is describing is that this person has a visceral reaction to certain kinds of people, like when the blacksmith or silversmith comes to silver and it's got so much dross in it that even after you test it and you work on it, that it's still trash. And so what do? You throw it away. It's not used. It can't be used. And so there are people who we might call um, classless or despicable, though their life that they live is the direct opposite of what we find described in Psalm 15. And those are the kind of people, as Paul's going to say, um, not to hang around these kind of people, and
Right.
I'm just not going to do it. They're not the ones that I want to have table fellowship with because of how I might end up picking up some of that bad stuff. But the other side of this, you got this antithetical parallelism. You got one kind of statement and the direct opposite coming the next. But those who are especially honored are people who fear the Lord.
Right.
Those are the people who I want to. Uh, those are my friends. Those are the ones that I want to especially lift up. I want to hold them up. Um, Not as we're better than anybody else, but those are the kind of people who I find fellowship with, just like Yahweh is saying in Psalm 15. There's certain kinds of people who are welcome in my tent. And there are certain kinds of people who I am uh, going to allow to um, uh, influence me one way or the other. And I can be influenced badly or I can
Yeah.
be influenced goodly.
Yeah.
And so
I
that's
think
how
the
I read that.
antithesis there, the antithesis, I should say, the antithesis there between those two lines is really important to grab hold of. See, to me, it's sort of like covenant loyalty.
Well, it is,
You
yes.
know,
Yeah.
there are certain people who have no loyalty to the covenant, who do not walk
Yeah.
the way, who
They,
mistreat other people, who do not love
um,
their
they're
neighbors.
reprobates. Yeah.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
and when we see that, when we see a bully mistreating their neighbor, or we see people, beating up on their neighbors or extorting their neighbors or whatever, whatever it might be, or even in something as horrible as the Holocaust, killing their
Oh,
neighbors.
absolutely.
Um, we despise that because of the
We
covenant
do.
we have. We are in relationship with God, and our covenant with God says we're going to love our neighbor, and we see other people not loving, we despise that action. We despise what that is in the world. It's the evil in the world, and so we despise it.
Mhm.
But we also, on the other hand, when we're with people who love their neighbors, we honor them, and we honor each other as we love the Lord and seek the Lord. So that's kind of, as you were saying, it's about who you're hanging out with. Who's the company you keep. Are you going to keep company with those who despise their neighbors, who hurt their neighbors, who kill their neighbors, bully their neighbors, extort their neighbors, or are you going to hang out with the people in terms of living in the tent, the
Yeah,
holy
those
tent?
are behaviors that Yahweh himself disapproves of.
Right.
So I will allow my disapproval to be shaped by Yahweh himself. I'm
Hmm.
not going to approve what Yahweh doesn't approve. I'm not going to hang with what Yahweh says. I
Right.
detest a lying tongue.
That's
There's
the
six
that's
things
the
that the Lord hates, it
that's the
says in
covenant loyalty,
Proverbs.
right? Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
I'm going to be here
Yep.
and with him. So yes,
And I think that's a great way of saying it because the next line is about those who stand by their oath even when it hurts. I mean, we can even say
absolutely.
that about God. God is faithful even though it
That's
hurts, right?
that's Hesed right there,
Yeah,
right there.
yeah, exactly. That is the steadfast love of the Lord. We see it in
Absolutely.
Hosea. I'm going to love you even when
Absolutely.
it hurts.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to keep my promise. I'm going to keep my
Mm.
covenant, even though it hurts me to keep it right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a test of integrity. Will we maintain our promises? Will we keep our promises even when it's not going to be to our advantage
Oh
to
yeah.
keep them? Right?
Yeah, I think behind that again, I'm so glad you brought that up because this really is in the covenant, and Yahweh is the model. So the big s- giant sin in the Hebrew Bible is the golden calf. And what did Yahweh do? He kept the covenant and is like, I'm
Hmm.
going to keep this. I'm going to be faithful. And so that's the testimony of the God creed is that he is faithful. He is faithful.
Exodus 34.
And
Yeah. Hmm.
X 34:6. And you alluded to Hosea, like in chapter 3:1, he says to Hosea to go love his wife, even though she's loved by another, and love her as I love the Israelites. It says in Hosea 3:1 and 2, and is like, okay, so there you go.
Hmm.
That is not a pleasant experience, but here you have something where Yahweh has made a promise. And I think if you remember the story where the sermonator comes in, he swore by himself. There's no higher way that Yahweh swears by himself, which means if he breaks his oath, he something's got to happen to him.
Yeah. You're talking about Hebrews,
And
right?
so
Yeah. Mhm.
this covenant does cost God. It does hurt the Lord. It does show his truth. And if we are walking the way with the Lord and our oaths are nothing in comparison to the Lord's, so we keep them even when it's not to our advantage, it's not to our, we don't get benefits out of it. In fact,
Hmm.
it just literally hurts us.
Hmm.
And so this is, I think, one of the climactic statements of integrity, that I keep my word even when it costs me.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
this is powerful. So
Well, and then the last two lines that deal with the list of what it means to love your neighbor are economic in character. Uh, don't lend money at interest. Don't take advantage of another's poverty to make money for yourself, right?
exactly.
And create an indebtedness
Yeah.
to enslave them is another way of saying that, I guess. And then do not take a bribe. And there's an integrity here. I'm not going to break justice in order to have an advantage for myself. I'm not going
Exactly.
to give,
Yep.
I'm not going to do injustice
Yep.
so that I can have gain, right? I'm not
That's
going to
right.
gain by
Yep.
injustice. So I'm not going to take a bribe and I'm not going to try to make money off the poor,
That's right.
which, what a statement that is. And I'm not going to make money off the poor. And yet, a lot of our
We live in
system
a world
is
where that's
that's our
the bread and
system,
butter of our
and what
world, making money off the
of the
poor,
poor.
man.
Just like
But
Israel built palaces on the backs of the poor, right?
absolutely.
Jeremiah complains about that.
Yeah,
So the rich have always built themselves through the poor, charging
absolutely.
interest on the high
Yeah,
interest on the credit cards and all sorts of things that
yeah,
fit that
yeah.
scenario. Are
Well,
we the sort of people who are going to treat the poor well, or are we the sort of people who are going to exploit the poor to our own advantage?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good question, and it's one that the person who comes into as again from the very beginning, an alien, a resident alien who is dependent, not as a person of power. You're coming into the presence of the Lord as a dependent, kind of like the poor find
Right.
themselves in a place of dependency.
That's what
They
aliens are,
need
right? Yeah.
help, they
Mhm.
need grace. And if we take advantage of them, we are doing the exact opposite of what our host is doing for us when we come into his presence. It's like this is not even possible. At least covenantally it's not possible.
Right.
It's contrary. It's to cease to be who we're created to be when we behave like that.
Right.
And I find it interesting again that this money's here, because money is one of the things we love to lie about. And it's like, okay, so we're dishonest fundamentally about a lot of those different things. And it's like, and it culminates here. Okay, it's, money. The love of money is the root of all evil. The apostle says, and it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
money. Don't take bribe. That's money, and don't lend money at interest. you know, again, you cannot make money off another person's suffering. And it's like, no, no. Instead, you have the opportunity to be a blessing. You have the opportunity to practice Hesed.
Right.
That's what you have.
Hmm.
And this is the kind of person who can enjoy the fellowship of the Lord according to the psalm.
So we have
And
this, these are the ending ethical statements, you might say.
yeah,
This is who can dwell with God? Who can come into God's tent as a resident alien? Well, the one who loves their neighbor. And
absolutely.
these are some of the ways in which we love our neighbor, or we
Absolutely.
fail to love our neighbor. But this is the sort of person who can enter. And
Yeah,
as the last line of the psalm says, and this sort of person has a sense of security.
absolutely.
Because of your integrity, because of your commitment to the way of the Lord, because of your commitment to the covenant and to Yahweh, and you have entered the tent. Wow, if you live life in this way, you'll have that security, you'll have that stability. You won't be moved.
That's
Uh,
right.
I'm not. The world's not going to knock me over
Exactly.
when I love my neighbor. I
Yeah.
might get hurt, but when I love my neighbor, some people
Yeah.
might not like me loving my neighbor.
Exactly. Exactly.
But when I love my neighbor, I can enter God's tent and I can have this sense of stability in my life.
Yeah. It's this kind of thing that I just think Jesus cut his teeth on. And it shows up both in Paul and James, the what is to fulfill the law of Christ,
Hmm.
is to
Right.
love your neighbor as yourself. James says, the royal law of liberty, is like love your neighbor as yourself. This is the whole kit and caboodle here. And it even, and I want to just make this carefully, but it trumps loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, because the person in front of you is, in fact, the image of God. And how you treat the person standing in front of you as the divine imager, that is how you express your love for God. John just
Okay.
tosses the one out. He says, how can you say that you love God who you've never actually seen, and you got a divine image bearer standing right in front of you? And you have the means, he says, to provide for that person, and you don't. That's called hate. You can't
Yeah.
say you love God.
So,
So I
so
just,
loving your neighbor is loving God,
it
right?
is
Right.
absolutely,
Because God is in your neighbor. The face of God is in your neighbor. The image of God is in your neighbor. So to love your neighbor is to love
absolutely.
God. So loving God is still the first commandment,
Oh,
but you can't love God if you don't love your neighbor. And that's what John tells us in First John, right? You
exactly.
can't you can't love God if you don't love your neighbor. So
No,
loving your neighbor becomes kind of this um, criteria, this
it
this kind
is.
of way of evaluating who am I and what am I doing, and am I walking in the way? Do
Well, it's
I?
the demonstration of
Yeah,
faithfulness to the Shema.
there you
So,
go. That's a good way of saying it. Well, and if we do these things, the the promise is we shall never be moved, and we can dwell with God on His holy hill.
absolutely. Yep. Better is one day in the house of the Lord than a
Amen.
thousand
As
elsewhere.
we go to Mount Zion, when we assemble, as we enter the assembly of Mount Zion, uh, this is a good entrance reminder, right? Who
Exactly.
are we as we enter that space? And if we
Absolutely.
enter that space with flaws, which we all have them, we enter that space to be healed of our flaws
Exactly.
and for to become better people and to love our neighbor more deeply and more clearly and more adequately because we all
Absolutely.
are on a journey of loving our neighbor.
Yeah. We're on the way.
That's right. We're on the way. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the communion of the Holy Spirit be with you all. Amen.
Amen.